Hey, it's Don. I've got another BOLO video. It's going to be a mixed match of different things. I'll be bouncing around a lot. It's not going to be one specific area. I'm just going to throw out a couple different areas out at you, and we're going to talk a few minutes about each one just to give you some more options and some more ideas. So we're going to cut over there right now. Okay, so now here we are today. Today I've just picked a few areas that I look for all the time. I don't talk about many of these very often. For those of you who've followed me a little while, you know I worked for Disney for a while. I still have friends that work there, quite a few. So I do get inside deals on some things that people pick up for me, and they'll sell them to me for, a cutthroat rate for what they go for online because they don't want to get in trouble or have any issues with selling the items as a Disney employee, because there are some rules and regulations, I would imagine, still to this day. So I don't know all those today anymore. I know what we could and couldn't do back then. So Disney pins are something that I've always looked for, even locally. I buy these at auction even occasionally. You got to be careful because a lot of pins are just common. There are a ton, though, that are worth some money. Now, just look at some of the prices. This first one here is 35 pins. It went for $9,000. And here's the same basic grouping again. They may have had 2 or 3 sets. Here's another one that went for a couple $1,000s. It could be a scam, but some of these do sell for thousands, like this Mad Tea Party one. Some are limited, like this one, down to only 100. Some, they'll save them up and get big, huge collections of them and sell them that way as well, too. This is a Little Mermaid, limited to 250. These pins are like, they call them the Holy Grail. Any time you see the word Holy Grail, it's meaning like one of the most expensive and sought after items in that specific category. And they can use Holy Grail in any category. It doesn't matter. I see it all the time. You can just do a search for Holy Grail. You'll find a ton of different areas that have that wording in it, including records or postcards sometimes, even comic books. So anyway, now, I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail because you're either going to find these or you're not. But as you can see, they go for a lot of money. Here's $1,000 on that one here. So it just depends on the pins you have, but always be on the lookout for these. Here is a perfect example of a better pin and the actual card it came on. Now, what most people do is they'll put them on lanyards. It's like a strap you can wear around your neck. And when I was working there, this thing was just coming into play. Disney made pins all the way back into the 60s, probably even before that. But they weren't really done as a collectible until, say, the last 20 or so years. So the collector pins on Disney are horrendously collected. Employees were required to wear them at some point and have them on depending on your department, and you were supposed to trade with guests in the park when they asked for them. There's actually organizations and clubs just for these pins. So I'm not going to go into much detail because you're going to find them and then you're going to have to look them up. There's not much I can show you that you're going to find any specific one because there's a ton of them, and I do mean a ton. So I think there's like 164,000 that's sold. That's just sold. There's like twice that, maybe not quite twice that, but a large chunk of them, like half or so, I think, sell from what I experience in sales on these. And, I could just sit here and just zoom through these. There's just so many of them that still carry a value. Now, some of them aren't really limited, but they are still expensive depending on era and when they came out and stuff like that. And Disney's just cranking these out as collectibles, so it's not like, it's something that's scarce because of any other issues other than it being intended to be. Here's a perfect example of somebody putting them on their clothing, but if you type in lanyard, you're going to see the lanyards all over the place too. Sometimes they'll show up with a Disney lanyard, meaning they probably bought it from an employee that had them, because there are some specifics and stuff like that too. So anyway, we're just touching on this as I said. Now the next one here is Hollycraft. I've touched on designer jewelry before. Hollycraft is one that I find fairly often, at least a specific piece, the Christmas trees. Probably 1 out of every 15 or 20 Christmas tree pins I see pretty much anywhere where I go anyway, like antique stores, thrift stores too. You can find them at thrift stores too. Estate sales are great, garage sales are great, church sales are the bomb. So those are all places that I would look for these type of material. Garage sales aren't as good as these, but you are going to find these occasionally on a table, and somebody's not going to know what they are. So now most of the pieces aren't these bright, beautiful pieces. That's why these are going for more money. Let me get you down. In fact, I've opened up a few here. The color scheme of Hollycraft For the standard piece that you are going to find, in fact, let's just get you one more so you can see a bunch of them. Now here is a Holycraft piece as well. Pay attention to these colors. They're almost exclusively on Holycraft pieces, so I don't even usually have to look at the back to be like 95% sure that that's a Holycraft piece looking into a case. So I'm not wasting my time. There's other brands I look for, but I'm not going to throw them all out at once because there's just too many differences in costume jewelry. But this one here is more identifiable than most of the other ones because the paste, the stones in these are like a pastel, like a soft muted tone. Let's come back over to this one here. And I'll show you this one here too. Again, there's many different other kinds too, brands, but Holycraft is a designer brand that's cheaper than most of the other ones, but it's still well collected and still sells for a reasonable price. Most of these pieces like this I can get for a couple bucks at the most, usually $2 for something like this. And there's the markings. There's different dates on them. They go back into the 40s for the most part, and sometimes it'll just say Holycraft. I think there's another terminology they use too. We'll see one hopefully here, but I think they have a secondary name they used as well. Again, the same color of stones. This picture is better than this one here, so they don't have the light play on it very well. It's just a dark image. It would look pretty much the same as this. They're all the stones of this one genre that they do are all similar to this. So look for that color. Look for that color scheme. Again, this isn't the highest dollar one. I'm giving you one that you should find. I could give you the pie in the sky ones. It's not going to help you if you're not going to find them. I found a lot of Holycraft, and I mean a lot. I found dozens of the Christmas trees, and they go for 30 to say 50 or 60 bucks in season. This might be something you might want to hang on to. They will sell for more money because people like younger kids will buy them for a parent who collects them as a Christmas present. That's why they always go for more, and I'm sure that's the case because I see them. There's people that have them as ornaments in their tree and all kinds of stuff like that too. So I'm not centering in on the prices so much as identifying these easily without wasting your time. So if you see a couple hundred pieces, you're looking for these muted pastelish tones, not the bright ones that you see, the reds and the purples and the real bright pinks. These are duller, I've always felt. Like, again, this one here. And again, the dates are, there's many different dates on these, so don't always expect it to be 54 or something along that line, or even 55. There's 49 or 47, I believe, too. Just another example. You can see how it's written in Corp. Sometimes you won't be able to read the Holycraft part, and you'll just see the Corp. And you can usually tell by that too. These are designer, well-made pieces. They're not going to go for a fortune, but you're going to find them at least. You should, especially if you're buying and trying to buy big assortments. Again, look at this stone. This is the third one in a row with these same color patterns. That's one of the keys, to look for the color of the stones from the face and save all that time looking at the other hundreds of pieces that are just junk. Obviously, jewelry pieces, if they're really fancy, you should look at them anyway, but these are on the low end, so they're not going to be as hard to find. So anyway, look for the color on these. Now, here is the Christmas tree specifically. Sometimes they are not marked. This one is. You can see it right there as well. Sometimes they're not marked, or the pin, it's on the pin or something like that, and it's really hard to find. The same color schemes on these stones. They're muted. They're not bright. This one might be a little brighter than some, but for the most part, they look like this. They're cheap looking. They're mid-late 50s. Some of these probably are into the 60s as well. Now, again, they don't go for a ton of money, but you're going to find them. I find a lot of Christmas tree pins, and I do mean a lot. More so than probably pretty much any of the other pins, because other companies made them too to knock off of Holycraft. Holycraft was one of the big ones for Christmas trees. Now, you can look into other Holycraft items or other Christmas trees, because there are some, but again, this is one you should find. This was well sold, even through catalogs like Sears and things like that, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, let's move on. Now we're going to look just for a minute here at sunglasses in the realms of places I go. Antique stores, thrift stores to some extent, and flea markets especially, and estate sales 100%. Vintage glasses show up all the time. There's only a couple main brands and styles that I usually run into. I don't run into the high designer ones. I'm not showing you the first page of Sunglasses. I'm showing you, I don't even know how far down we are. I started to get to this section. It's page 4, so these are 200. So we're almost 1,000 in to show you these. We're way down in price because there's some that are going for thousands. I don't find the expensive ones. I find these. American Optical is one brand that I find quite often. Any of the aviator style glasses, for me, sell horrendously well. And those are the things that I find that were well worn by just normal people all the time at estate sales or flea markets, like an antique flea market, or even in an antique mall where I can pick up these things. We're just going to center in on just a couple of them here. Now, one name that I find, even at thrift stores, when you're leaving a thrift store, usually at the counter of like a Goodwill, there's a big, huge wicker basket of sunglasses. I look through those every single time. Even if the lenses are messed up and they're $1 or $2, I'll still probably buy them if it's name brand because the frames will still sell. Some of the glasses, like something like this, if the lenses were even missing, the frames would sell. Most of the Bausch & Lomb or any of the frames you see for aviator glasses, if they're vintage original, even if they're missing the frames, will still sell. They're not going to go for like $500 that a pair with the actual lenses would go for, but you're still going to get some money on them. So this is just name calling out here. So Oakley is one that I remember. It was very popular in the 80s when I was younger. I had a couple pairs. I lived in Florida. I had quite a few pairs actually, so I always look for Oakleys. I do find them occasionally. Many people don't know the difference in age, so sometimes you can find them at like a antique mall or a flea market, as I said, or even a church sale, garage sale, and they'll just be on a table for 20 or 30 bucks. Sometimes even you can find the actual, like the blades, the earpieces for Oakley, replacement kits and things like that, dirt cheap. Sometimes I can find those at actually auctions and buy a couple, cases of those occasionally. So just keep that in mind on these. Look for vintage glasses. All those baskets at the thrift stores on the counter. Around here, there's 3 or 4 thrift stores that have baskets just of sunglasses. Salvation Army does it. Savers used to do it as well, too. Most of the Savers have them in pegboards, but I look through sunglasses everywhere I go. Again, even if the lenses are scratched, most people, I've watched people look at pairs and go, oh man, the lenses are scratched, and then set the things down, and I walk right behind them and pick them up. You can sometimes get the lenses, replacement lenses, for pretty much dirt cheap, and then put them in yourself, and then sell them complete and double your money or more, even with the cost of buying the lenses. Sometimes it depends on the frames themselves. Sometimes I'll just blow out the frames and not worry about the lenses. Replacing them. It's just not worth it. If like a BOLO or something, any of these designer ones, these type of Ray-Bans here do show up quite often at antique stores, for 30 or 40 bucks or 50 bucks. They don't look them up. They're just glasses to many people. Even when you go into the 80s versions, they're not worth as much money. 400 again, it's over 400, but we're not worried about the price. Usually it's going to be marked there on the inside of where the nose piece is. It's going to say 1/10 12 karat. Sometimes it's 1/10 14 karat or even 18 karat. Gold filled. Bausch & Lomb, it may just have B and L. It may not say Ray-Ban at all on it, other than maybe on a case or something. So keep that in mind. The green lenses are almost always worth some money too. Green yellow ones are even better. Red ones are horrendously rare. Now another Bausch & Lomb. These have some scratches on it, or is that a reflection? Either way, even with scratches on the lenses, I would still be able to sell these because you can get new lenses to go in these, believe it or not. So it's a known pattern. It's been around for a while. There's numbers on the bridges or the earpieces for the most part in most sunglasses, and the numbers will dictate where it's made, and you can literally just do a Google search or search on eBay and find those numbers from those glasses. So now next one here is an 80s. I actually have a pair similar to this in one of these cases from the 80s that's original to me. I bought it new, and I still have them. I wore glasses sometimes, so I couldn't wear sunglasses all the time, and this one I only used to wear once in a blue moon. I actually found them not too long ago. They were buried away in a box for years. So I know this style. So the minute I see these cases, even with the Bausch & Lomb worn off sometimes, it's always worth looking for. Some of those cases can go for some decent money as well, too. So just look out for these. These will show up. Even in the 90s, these can go for some good money. Ray-Bans are always hot. And again, American Optical, AO, it just says on the earpiece. It may not even say American Optical. It'll just have AO. Again, 1/10, 12 karat, and that's going to be marked on the bridge somewhere most of the time. Let's see if we can actually find if it shows a close-up of the markings. This one has American Optical, but for the most part, it just says AO on some of them. This is actually marked in the frame, so that's even better yet. Just look out for stuff like this. They do show up. I'm not exaggerating. Even if the earpieces are all cracked up like that, as you see, you can have people repair that. They will replace those. Chances are whoever bought these is not going to replace them. Opticians collect these. People that wear contacts or glasses like me actually collect glasses. I do like glasses. I've been fascinated with them since I was a child and found my first vintage pair. So now the next and last one here is jigglers. Now I've talked about them before, but I'm going to give you a key to find them. A lot of the Salvation Armies around here and Goodwills have the big tubs. Most people store clothing in those big tubs sitting in the toy shelves with just hundreds of little toys thrown in them. Sometimes they're full and you could spend a long time digging through these, but most of the time I'm able to pull a few of these. They're oily jigglers, they're called. They're rubbery figures. Some of them are only this big. They were actually sold and could be found in gumball machines, all the way up to carded versions or just loose versions that were dumped in a big bin at a toy store. Kind of like what Toys R Us would have sometimes with the dinosaurs and the bugs sitting in big dump bins. And a dump bin is just basically a big bin that just stuff's dumped in, like the dump bins at Walmart for the DVDs. That's just basically a dump bin. Some of the dump bins in the toy stores were like a raised platform, and then it had a little border, and then they would dump them in, so you wouldn't be reaching down. I see them sometimes like that for like Hot Wheels cars at some places. Jigglers have gotten insane in prices. I grew up finding these everywhere. You'd hang them up in the car, all over the place. Russ Berry, look that up. They used to show up at like Hallmark stores. Gumball machines as well. Again, some of these are really, really small. And that's why I say those bins at the Salvation Army and Goodwills and stuff are a prime source for those, because all they do is all those little tiny things are just dumped into there. If you're at Savers, look at the bags on the Savers, on the peg wall back by the toys. Before ours closed down again, we don't have any Savers. I would find something there every single time I went. There would be at least a tiny little dog jiggler that was worth 30 or so bucks. Garage sales, church sales, flea markets, antique malls, all of these places are good. They're usually just bagged up. They're not thought of as an individual toy that's worth anything. And that's why the big bins at Salvation Army, Goodwill, and if your Savers does it, which I doubt, you're probably looking at the bags there. But most of those little tiny mom and pop thrift stores have those big dump bins too. I don't run into many that don't have a quarter bin somewhere in their store, or a dump bin that just has tiny little doodads like that in it. That's the number one place I find jigglers at. Again, don't go sharing this out. You'll see occasionally somebody else sitting on their hands and knees, which is what I do, and pull that bin off the shelf, and I'll dig through that entire thing wherever I go, because I can usually get at least 30 or 40 bucks out of every one of those big tubs. Sometimes I can walk out with 20 jigglers worth 30 or 40 bucks a piece out of a 20 or so minute dig into one of these bins. So keep that in mind. This is $1,100, $1,000, $750. Jigglers have gotten insane. Here's a slee stack from, that is a holy grail, a slee stack, 1975, Land of the Lost. Awesome one. I haven't seen that one before, honestly. The Mermaid's hot. These Russ Berry ones I do find, and I see them mixed in with troll lots. So if you see trolls, and they've got the little trolls, 100% look through every one for this dude or the other dozen or so that look like this in different colors. This is a secret area that I've delved in for a long time. I even stopped showing them. So if you go back to some of my earlier videos on my hauls, I used to show the little quarter items. These are what I was looking for, and I still look for, I still find. Even at my pickers, they'll have big bins and dump piles that they bought at auction of these. All those big bins of just little tiny things like this is key area that I find these in. So I could show you these all day long. The dog ones miss. Most people miss these. Most of these are dated. There's ugly dolls too. Let's just move on. Let me just show you a few close-ups here. This is the last category, but this is a key area, and I'm not exaggerating. This has faux hair on it as well too, so these are well done. The swinger, this one still has the sticker. Most of the time you're not going to find a sticker. It may not have a maker in it. It has bubbles in the casting sometimes that were popped. It's just a little cheap junky thing. It looks literally like a gumball machine piece because that's where a lot of these came from. So they were nothing back then. A nickel if you were lucky. Maybe a penny. Nowadays, again, these are small, so you're not looking for huge things on these, and they still garner a huge price. So, now Ben Cooper is the name. If you see Ben Cooper on almost anything, they did Halloween costumes too, so they're not worth anything. But any animals that say Ben Cooper, remember that name. It's going to be sometimes a little hard to see if it's a black figure like the King Kong one, which we'll show you too. I found dozens of King Kong. That's one of the most common ones that I run into, usually marked on the head. Hong Kong, it may just say, it may not even say Ben Cooper. These things are rubbery and jiggly, and when you shake them, they bounce all over the place. Usually bizarre creatures. Over 100 apiece these went for, basically. This one is pretty popular. These came out all the way into the 70s and 80s, some of these versions of these. They're small. These are small too. This one was in a gumball, the bigger sized gumballs that you got for like a quarter maybe, I think, back in the day. I still pay a quarter for these at junk sales all the time. If I go to a junk sale or a church sale or a big rummage sale, I'm walking out with a handful of these almost every time I go somewhere. Don't be sharing this info because this honestly will make you more money than going to a clothing sale if you get a big dump bin that has a bunch of these in it. I'm telling you, you can make hundreds of dollars in your little palm of your hand from these little dudes. And these did come in gumball machines. There was little aliens when I was a kid, which I had dozens and dozens of them. My friend had a couple hundred of these. Some of those nowadays, those little aliens are 10 to 20 bucks a piece. So if you had a couple hundred of them, you're talking some money. So anyway, let's move on here again. This is one big area. Many different sizes. The small ones are the ones most people miss. Again, this one's like 3 or 4 inches. I believe he's about this tall. He comes in several different colors. It's not a great casting. It's got flashing. It may not be marked. A lot of these, again, the sticker won't be on the bottom. Yeah, and this one's missing the sticker, so you can just barely make out part of the actual markings from the maker as well right there, too. But they're really generic. They're just a big chunk of rubber. Nothing fancy, you know. Some of them are dated, some of them aren't. So, junk. These are junk. These are what most people would pass up. They'll be looking for a Star Wars figure that might be worth 10 or 15 bucks and walking by this one because they don't know that this tiny little rubber dog or tiny little rubber dragon is worth 50 to 100, 2, 3, $400. I find more of these any day of the week than I do Star Wars figures, Tron figures, Black Hole, any of those kind of stuff. The small ones are always missed. So, jigglers, oily jigglers. So, you know, this is something you've got to know 100%. This is going to make you some money. I promise you. There pretty much isn't a store that I go to that I don't find a couple of these at least one, you know. If it's a big enough store and there's a bunch of stuff there. Garage sales as well, church sales, flea markets, all that stuff that you can go to. Oily jigglers. Don't miss those things. And here is the King Kong one. This one I found dozens, and I do mean dozens. If you look back to my older videos, again, there's 3 or 4 sizes of them. They're usually just marked Hong Kong. Sometimes they're Hong on one foot and Kong on the other one. This one's even missing a toe. You know, 15 bucks, it's from Australia. It probably was sold to somebody over here. Ben Cooper, I believe, made this one as well, too. But this one would have had like a little hook, as most all of them do, and it had a stretchy, like a looping, so you could hang it in the car or, you know, just from somewhere else. So if like the fan was blowing, it would jiggle and bounce. That's why they're jiggly. And they were kind of oily when you felt them, so they're called oily jigglers. So anyway, this is the most common one that I find. We'll talk about bendies and those as well, too, because bendies and bendables are a key category as well. And again, there's a ton of those that most people miss. I just got a few more here. Another one. Here's a dime. This should give you a perfect example of the size. This is a foo dog. I don't know if they have that in there. It's a foo dog is what this is. It's a Chinese character. That's why I said dragon. A lot of the people would refer this to like a dragon of some sort. I don't know, maybe this is a foo dog, it looks like. It's small. It came in the big size gumball machine. I'm telling you, these are easy to find. I would not be surprised if a bunch of you went out and dug around in these big bins and didn't come out with at least a couple of these. They're going to be rubbery. They're going to be oily and greasy feeling for the most part. You know, some of them are really stretchy too, so don't stretch them if they're vintage. They could get ruined sometimes. So, and I just got one last one on here. This is just one of the bigger ones. These are a little tougher to find, but these are usually mixed in with just a bunch of junk toys. That's usually where I find these at. Maybe if you're at a garage sale and there's just a bunch of toys thrown in there and they look dirty, dingy. Sometimes these will be discolored. They'll need to be washed. And if you can't wash it all off, sometimes an eraser, kneaded eraser, or one of the crumbly art erasers will get that all off there. You just got to be a little careful depending on how the color is done. If it's applied versus actually embedded into the actual rubber. And most of the time, the ones that I've seen are applied, so some of that could come off. It just depends on the jiggly and who made it. So Muzzies, this is a rustberry again. So look out for these things. They came in a card. Some of them came in little bags. I don't find them bagged or carded ever. I have found the gumball machine ones still in the gumballs sometimes in big lots. So again, these are some key areas that I do look for. These are something that you should find fairly quickly. Within the first 30 days, I would be shocked if you didn't find at least one of these 4 categories to purchase if you go to the same kind of places that I've been talking about. Antique malls, not so much, but go to your local live auctions and go to the flea markets and estate sales especially. This kind of stuff. And this stuff is missed many times by people because it's just stretchy rubber. They think it's newer. It's not an action figure. Again, I'll watch people walk by these to get a $10 or $20 action figure or a $30 Transformer. Vintage, it's G1, Generation 1. I know it's still a good Transformer, but this stuff is worth more than that. And they're smaller, they're easier, there's no moving parts that can break, no stickers to be lost. This is it. This is it. And I know dozens of these types of areas. Mark's Toys I talk about, but there's more than just that that's from the same era that's worth some money. So anyway, that's what I have for you. Well, there you go. Hopefully that gave you some real good ideas on this. As always, any questions you have, just put them down below. I, again, honestly and sincerely thank you for all the support I get. I really try to put out what's useful to everybody the best I can. I may be putting more content, more like images from other sources and things mixed in here just to give you some ideas on stuff. Just because if I'm not sharing it and all, and I'm only sharing it here, it's not a YouTube video, I may be able to actually upload them to somewhere else. So anyway, I'm looking into that now because then I wouldn't have to worry about YouTube's regulations on certain things that I can and can't put, and I'd be able to actually play some music for you. Now, I'm honestly looking into that. I don't want to break any rules or regulations or anything like that. So anyway, I am looking into that. So again, I thank everybody, and that's what I have for you today.